Right, so it doesn't seem to be getting any warmer in the UK, and we're still enjoying our wood burner, but I am getting a bit bored of having to walk outside to get logs when I need them for the fire. The plan is to make an indoor wood store which matches the interior of the living room, so we're going to go for this modern bent wood design.
So there are a number of different ways that you can use to bend wood, and the technique we're going for is kerf cutting. We actually did a video over on our channel where we built a slide using a number of these techniques. We'll pop a link in the description below if you want to check it out. To kick things off, we're going to be making a mould. So we're going to be using 2 layers of 12mm ply for this, and then we're going to cut this to match the final shape that we're looking for in the unit.
We drilled some holes around the perimeter of both of these faces, and this takes a little bit more effort now, but it saves a huge amount of time later as it helps us with clamping up. We also made a couple of spacer boxes which keeps both faces perfectly parallel and helps keep things really square at the end. Once our mould is ready, we use a little bit of blue tape to mark the centre point and then the distance to the start of each of the curves to help us with marking up on the real piece.
So whenever we're kerf cutting, we always like to start off with a test piece, just so we can work out exactly how many cuts we actually need. Here you can see we started off trying 9, but it wasn't quite enough for that bend. So we went back, added a 10th, and this worked perfectly. So when it came to cutting the real thing, we made 10 kerf cuts, each spaced a blade's width apart, and we also marked this on our crosscut sled as a reference point. We also set the blade height to leave 1.5 layers of ply, as we found that gives the best flexibility. It's worth noting that we're using birch plywood for this, as from our experience it gives much better results and you get far less cracking.
Once all our cuffs were cut, we used a bit of 30-minute epoxy mixed with some sawdust to turn it into a paste and fill these into the curves. We could then clamp this around our mould and leave it to cure. Once the epoxy was cured, we used our portable Triton spindle sander to remove the worst from the inside of the curve. We did this on both sides, and then we came back and used a bit of sandpaper wrapped around a dowel to get the bit we couldn't quite reach in the middle.
Part of our design for this build was to have a number of different compartments to hold kindling, firelighters and the logs. We used a straight bit in our Triton moth router to cut rebates for the shelves to sit in. So that the logs don't fall through, we want to put a back panel on the log store, but we don't want this visible from the outside. So we mounted our router in our workbench router table, and we used this 1/2 inch rebating bit from Triton to cut a groove around the inside perimeter. We then cut down some 6mm MDF and rounded those corners to fit.
So we want this log store to sit flush against the wall, but there is some skirting running along the bottom. So we used our jigsaw just to cut a little relief around it so it sits nice and flush. We trimmed the shelves down to size and then used some wood glue to glue those into the rebates that we cut earlier on. Once this was dry, we came back with some scrap plywood and just filled those little gaps left at the front. This is all going to get edge banded later, so it doesn't matter if it's not perfect.
We want to be able to easily move the unit between the fireplace and the outdoor log storage, so we've mounted the whole thing on casters. But to keep these nice and neat, we hid these away behind an apron so you can't see it from the front. To cover up that end grain plywood, we came back and edge banded the whole thing. We cut some strips of pine and used our thicknesser to get these down to 6mm. We then glued and pinned these in place before coming back with our flush trim bit and routing the edges.
Whenever we do edge banding, we always use these bandy clamps from Rockler, which makes it super simple. Next thing we want to do is build a small drawer for the firelighters to sit in the top of the unit. But before we do that, we're going to put a couple of coats of spray paint on the main body. We went for a couple of coats of white on the outside with a couple of coats of grey on the inside. To make the firelighter drawer, it's going to be super simple construction. We ripped some scrap plywood down and then cut rebates in the four corners and pinned and glued this together. We also cut a finger relief on the front face using our bandsaw and a Forstner bit. We use the same 1/2 inch rebating bit from earlier on to cut a rebate and sit the bottom panel into the drawer.
As this was going to live in Matt's lounge, we thought we'd make the front of this drawer a little bit prettier. So we cut and thicknessed a little bit of oak to use as a front face. To keep the front face of this drawer centred, we used a little trick that we picked up from April Wilkerson to ensure that the gaps around the outside of the drawer stay consistent. We then glued this in place and added screws from the back for added strength. Lastly, we used a flush trim bit in our router to match that finger relief that was in the front of the drawer. Then we came back and finished that front face with a coat of Danish oil.
So there you have it, there's the final piece. So one extra feature we added at the end was a way of locking it to the wall. Because I've got a couple of little ones running around, I wanted to make sure there was no way that that could come off the wall. We cut some aluminium angle and attached it at 3 points around the unit. We then had a little bit of oak left over to make 3 twist locks to be attached to the wall. This makes it really secure, but also really easy to take off the wall when we want to fill it up.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to see more of this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe to the Triton YouTube channel. And if you want to see more of us, head on over to our channel, It's Brothers Make. See you next time.
Cheers.